All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Practice Underwater. I'm your host, Matt Garino. I'm here, not with George today, with Alex. Alex, how are you today?
Doing great, Matt. How are you?
I'm a bit under the weather. I just spent 3 days with George's kids for a lot of it. And I left and I had this terrible cold coming back, and I found out they were also sick when I left. So, causation, I think, is pretty clear here.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to point fingers in that one, Matt. Hate that you're under the weather, but you're soldiering through it.
I'm pointing both fingers right now. But yeah, we're here. We got another great interview that Suzanne does with our fake doc Leah. This is a long time listener. This is a cool one to see how advanced a listener can be just on a baseline.
Yeah, she does a great job of pointing out a lot of the topics that we've talked about for a long time on the podcast, and clearly she knows a lot about practice selection, about practice management, and it's interesting to see what she has done and has not done in her practice in close to 2 years of ownership, just based on what she's learned from the podcast through osmosis over the last few years.
For sure, and we got a lot to get into that we'll save for the outro. But this one's a bit of a fixer upper. She's a small practice she bought from a very old dentist. So we'll kick it over to Suzanne, and we'll see you all in the outro.
Okay, so welcome back to another episode of Practice Underwater. This is Suzanne Rassi, and I'm here with our guest. She is a real doctor, and her fake name is Leah. Hey, Leah, how are you today?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. We're really excited. It's actually a fun time to have a female voice today. Since I've been on Practice Underwater, I've had the pleasure of a couple of male doctors that I've worked with. And so I'm happy to have you here today.
We've got to balance it out. There are those of us women who listen to dental podcasts out there.
Yes, there are more than we think. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's start off. Tell me, I'm excited to have you here, and tell me a little bit about the practice.
So I bought a small practice from a retiring, an 84-year-old dentist who was retiring. He was just working kind of at a minimum just to keep busy. I bought that in May of 2019. And at that point, they were just doing about $300,000 a year. And the whole practice was extremely old and dated, and nothing had been updated. I'd actually been looking at maybe doing a startup prior to that, and had gotten to the point of even doing my floor plan and starting to look at equipment and things like that. And then when this came up, I kind of treated it like a pseudo startup because the real estate was involved, and I was able to purchase the building for way cheaper than I was going to be able to do the startup kind of building costs. So when I bought it on May 1st, and I closed the doors and just renovated the entire thing for 2 weeks. And just took out all the 80s saloon doors covering sterilization and just like brown carpet everywhere. And just updated everything all at once. I felt like there wasn't any other way to do it. So I had a great contractor, and he got it done 2 weeks, all new floors, redid the ceilings, walls, got new chairs. That kind of happened a little more gradually. Digital x-rays, put computers in the rooms, and got a nomad and things like that. So it was a little bit of a shock for the staff, but I went ahead and hired a new assistant and a hygienist. He didn't have a hygienist prior to that. So I was kind of mixing old and new and trying to grow just right away. So I kind of had it in a startup mindset, but with at least a good base of patients so I could pay myself day one or maybe day, 60. So, but it's been going good.
Good. So other than renovations, tell me about what you did to grow the practice. Because you said, you grew it financially as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was a lot kind of available as far as the patient base was not huge, but there was still tons of patients who had been seen, in the past and just hadn't been back in a long time. So we tried, just reaching out to. The good news is the staff that was there. My front desk has been worked for the other dentist for 40 years. One of the assistants had been there for 20 something years, so they all knew everybody. So they started calling people and trying to get them in. I created a website and started doing some more marketing and just we had so much availability and hygiene because he had been doing his own hygiene, and I just went ahead and hired somebody full time, and opened it up. So essentially, if somebody called, there was somebody, couldn't you come tomorrow? We were able to get them in right away, and just trying to kind of get involved in the community and put myself out there. We're talking to people about the practice and things like that. That's kind of helped grow the practice, and also just being more productive with the patients that are there, and pointing out all their cracked teeth and things more proactively they could work on. There's still a lot out there. I'm trying to ease them into it, but I have an intraoral camera, and I just try to show them pictures and kind of show them where they are and start them thinking about, maybe we should do something before that breaks. And that's actually, it's taken, I'm almost at 2 years now, but I'm starting to have people say yes a lot more to stuff that I pointed out, when I first started, now that they trust me, and, they're ready to kind of move forward and get something more comprehensive done.
Okay. So at this point, how far booked out is hygiene?
Our hygiene's still not super booked out. During COVID, well, right when we opened back after COVID, I hired another hygienist just on Mondays to try to catch up. And then I've just kept her on there so that I always have some availability. But right now we're just booked out this week, essentially, and actually we still have openings even next week. But the good news is when patients call, we can get them in right away. And a lot of times by the end of the week, it is full. So we still have some availability and hygiene as we go. But we're still able to stay pretty productive with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about your schedule?
It's kind of, maybe it's because of the patient base, but my schedule stays more full. It tends to be like my whole next week is booked, and I don't have an opening until the Tuesday after. Well, no, that day's booked too. Yeah, so like I'm booked out about a week and a half, whereas I have some openings on hygiene. But I have some bigger cases that I'm working on and things too. So sometimes I'll have one patient for the whole morning, that kind of thing.
Okay, so tell us about the type of procedures you do in the practice.
I do, basic bread and butter stuff. I do some Invisalign. We're starting to get more and more of doing that. I'll do most extractions. In fact, my dad's a dentist, and is local and sends me his extractions because he doesn't like to do them. But I'm not yet doing implants. I mean, I'm restoring them. That's something I want to add to do because I did do a GPR and got a lot of surgery training. It's just not something that I've gotten all the equipment for and incorporated yet. I do endo except for maxillary molars because I feel like that's just asking for trouble. And I've been taking some more comprehensive courses, so I'm starting to do some like aesthetic kind of full mouth cases.
Okay, very cool. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about team. Tell the audience about team members and that transition.
Yeah, so it's a mixed bag. I've got a 75-year-old assistant, a 72-year-old front desk, and then 2 20-year-old, like a hygienist and assistant who are in their 20s, and then another kind of swing assistant that does some front desk, some assisting that's in her 30s, but she's kind of brand new, just took like a basic assisting course. So she's kind of just a rover, get everything done that needs to be done. Helps out the front desk because the front desk is good at doing insurance and doing patient stuff, but still having a little, like I'm a computer stuff and, anything that I need help with on that front, I need an extra person to kind of help and manage that part. So that extra assistant kind of helps out. So my 75-year-old assistant works part-time, and then the swing assistant works in the afternoon as kind of overflow when she's not there.
So who are you doing these larger procedures? You referenced an assistant that you had all morning, or a patient that you had all morning. Who are you doing those types of procedures with? Yes,
I have the younger assistant that's like my main assistant. So she essentially follows me from room to room and assists me for all my procedures. And then the other assistant is like a backup, bring the next patient back, turn over the rooms, kind of make sure sterilization's running, pour up models and that kind of thing. And then I have just one main assistant. That's the younger one that I hired pretty shortly after I bought the practice to be just my go-to. You know what I'm talking about when I say this instrument. And most of the time don't have to say the word, just hand me what I want. So she's my main assistant, and I probably work her too hard, but I just have her follow me around and be my main assistant the whole time, and have everybody else kind of just doing backup.
Okay. So your rover or floater, what is, does she have some front office duties, or is she kind of jumping in wherever the need is to help the current administrative team member?
Yeah. So there's the one part-time assistant. She mostly just does back and stuff in the back. Is sterilization. She runs the ordering, and then will help me out where is needed. And then the rover she does assisting if the other assistant's not there, kind of seating the patients and things like that. And then she does otherwise mostly helping out at the front, checking patients in, helping out with payment plans, and doing that kind of more financial stuff. Because we have like a membership plan and are starting to do some more payment plans. So she's the one who knows how to run all that software and get people in for that. So she's kind of like my go-to IT person, and then assisting in the afternoons when the other assistant's not there, just for overflow.
Okay. So what about long-term? What is the long-term plan here?
I am just slowly waiting for my other ones to retire. The front desk, actually, she does a good job. She doesn't say much, and there might be stuff that she doesn't understand that she's just not going to bring up to me. But for the most part, she gets it filed. She can, she runs everything up there like she's supposed to. She's not like the most perky, peppy person to be like the front desk face. But if I answer the phone when I'm here, like on a Friday and we're closed, they'll be like asking for her. That she's been answering the phone for 40 years at the practice, so they know her. I will say the older assistant, she started out full time, and then we moved her to part time, and she's not a good chairside assistant. She just drives me crazy with the way that she forgets things and fumbles with things and talks out loud about how she's messing something up. So I've kind of tried to. She's a really nice person, and she actually takes my kids to practices in the afternoon sometimes when I can't get them where they need to be. So she's like turning into a personal assistant / getting things done around the office to keep her employed as long as she wants to be, but moving her kind of out of the patient side role just for my general happiness. At first, I was kind of splitting it up between her and the other one, and then I just realized how much I dreaded when I had to work with her, because there's just so many frustrations and inefficiencies. So we just switched it so she can do what she needs to do. She's still helpful, but she's not like my number one choice for an assistant. But it works out pretty well because we have most of the time a relatively slow schedule, where I'm just working out of one column, and then when we might just have somebody get seated as I'm finishing up or that kind of thing. So I'm not usually like running 2 rooms at one time if I can avoid it.
Okay. I just love how honest you are with yourself. You recognize what you like, and you're accommodating that in the office, and I like how real you are with yourself. So daily hurdles, tell us about a regular day.
We've got it going pretty smoothly. I think we probably have a lot of systems that we could improve on. We have like a morning huddle, and really that's kind of me usually just talking through who's coming and what we need to remember. And a lot of times we'll look ahead and say, oh, this person needs to be scheduled for this, or, we haven't seen their brother in a really long time or whatever. So we kind of go through that, and most everybody, like I have a really good staff as far as everybody works hard and everybody tries to get things done and does whatever needs to be done. I don't have any complaints on that front, so I'm really lucky. But sometimes it goes smoothly, and sometimes it's actually we've been getting busier. It's gotten a little more crazy. We still get a lot of last minute cancellations, which drive me crazy, and I really don't know how to avoid it. But I feel like part of the reason is because we're not booked out. We don't have a lot of people waiting to get in, so it's harder to find somebody who really wanted to come this week but couldn't come because we have openings and we've been able to accommodate them. So I feel like as it gets busier, we'll be able to fill those last minute cancellations a little bit better. I think people use COVID as an excuse to, oh, I have a fever, or my husband has a fever, I can't come today. But for the most part, we have pretty good patients. I'm mostly fee for service. I still take Delta Dental, which was the only insurance that the previous dentist took. He did take Medicaid too, and I'm phasing that out just because I can't stand all the people canceling last minute. But for the most part, we're just fee for service, and we're doing a membership plan and just trying to keep it like a more relationship based practice where we take a little bit more time. And some patients won't come because we'll be a little bit more expensive, but there's still patients out there that'll pay a little bit more to have that smaller relationship based practice. So that's kind of the angle we're trying to go for.
So let's talk bigger picture. You mentioned, sort of I asked longer term plan, and it sounded like a little bit of an interim plan. Let's call it a medium term plan. Let's talk bigger picture. Do you like your schedule? Tell me a little bit about future plans.
So when I listen to shared practices and try to picture my vision, now we all know that everybody on shared practice is entitled to change their vision at any moment. But I've been back and forth between, I work Monday, Tuesday, half day Wednesday, and then Thursday, 8:30 to 5:30, or 8:30 to 5 really. And I don't want to work any more clinical days than that. That keeps me busy, and I'm looking forward to that half day Wednesday, and I'm really looking forward to Friday when it comes around. I don't necessarily want to work less than that. I might feel a little lazy if I did that. Although, I do like to travel and take time off and do stuff with my kids. So I wouldn't mind being able to take more time off. So I've been kind of back and forth between wanting to just grow, add an associate, and that way I can take more time off when I want it and not feel guilty about my staff who's not getting to work when I take time off, or just keep it small, keep it simple, keep the administrative headaches to a minimum, and just enjoy it the way it is. So right now I still need to grow just to keep busy and have it kind of self-sustaining. But I can't decide if I want to add an associate and kind of maximize my overhead and things like that, since we have, an empty office Wednesdays and Fridays, and people call, and we probably could stay busy. Or if I just want to keep it simple and enjoy my life the way it is.
Do you feel like there's a need to make that decision sooner rather than later?
Not necessarily. I feel like if I was going to gear up right now for an associate, I would just open up all the days and start growing as fast as possible. That way, when the associate started, I would have, a day and a half of full schedules to hand over. I feel like we'll grow a little slower if I keep it the way it is and just wait and see what happens. But I don't have to, I can wait until I'm, 50, and then I can hire an associate, and gear up towards selling the practice. I don't have to do it at any certain time, but I'm not ready to commit to my vision yet, I guess.
Okay. So you like the word pivoting.
I don't think I'm going to be going to group practice. I'm sure George would find me very boring. But, I do think, like, because my dad has a practice, and I was actually going to buy it, and he wasn't ready to retire yet. So I was going to do the startup, and then I just bought this practice because it came available. I have the opportunity to buy his practice in 5 years, probably. It's about 4 miles from my office. And he has an older, established practice, with twice as many patients as I have. But I just don't think I want to do it. I don't think I want to have to manage 2 staffs, even though I know all his staff and I grew up with them essentially. I wouldn't be opposed to buying his patient base and moving it over, although I don't think that's the best deal for him. And I'm just not going to worry about it. He's probably going to end up being that 84-year-old dentist still working full time, because that's kind of his personality. So I decided that I'm not going to try to make a decision about it yet, but I'm sure he would like for me to buy it. And if I was, wanting to be ambitious, that would be a good deal. I mean, it'd be a great practice because it's very underperforming for the number of patients and everything. You could do a lot with it. But I just don't know if I want to take that on.
Well, let's put the George thinking this would be boring aside for a moment. Okay. I mean, it sounds like you're pretty clear now, anyway, about the lifestyle choices that you've made. And I don't want to overuse the word boutique practice, but that kind of reminds me of that when you say, hey, it's not volume, it's not the patient, quantity, it's more of the patient quality, right? So what have you done marketing wise so far?
Well, we've, I had a website, and I have Weave, and so that sends review notifications. We've got about 60 5-star reviews. Like I've done some postcards with mixed results. I feel like my population, I'm like in a suburban area, I'll say. So it's to people still check their mail, and they're not just going to go on Google necessarily. So we still get some patients depending on what area, but I think I'm tabling that for now. I'm going to work on SEO stuff. I actually just switched my marketing company, who they're doing a lot more for me on the SEO side. So it seems to be getting some traction in as far as people searching for it. I've been kind of back and forth because I tend to like the older patient, because they need more dental work and they tend to have more money to spend on it. But also I need to keep hygiene filled, and I need, a wide variety of people because my schedule's full because I have a whole bunch of patients who need a lot of work. But hygiene's not full. So I need to kind of get a mix. So I think the SEO stuff will probably bring in younger patients. But so I'll kind of do a mix. And then just doing community related things, sponsoring stuff for my kids' school. And I do like a presentation there every year. I had to do a virtual one this year because of COVID, but I still sent 140 little bags with toothbrushes and prizes and stuff, and sent a little video of my kids giving a tour of the office and stuff. So, that just some like church involvement things, networking to try to get just kind of more organic reach to people. I feel like that's a little bit more valuable, but I'm kind of throwing a lot of things, especially kind of going in now to April, and we're back to the 6-month shutdown slump. So I've been trying to actually throw a lot into it in these last month or two to try to avoid having another drop in hygiene with the COVID shutdown, so we can finally just balance it out and go forward and not be thinking about that 6 months from, April.
Okay. So Leah, I'm sure the audience is dying to find out what it is that precipitated you to reach out to us. You've got a lot of things that you're really clear on in terms of a short-term goals. And so tell us, what precipitated your desire to kind of get some help in certain areas. What is our time together going to look like?
I guess probably just honing in maybe on the long-term plan or maybe the midterm plan. Just identifying things patient-wise or structure that we should improve on to be more efficient while we're here. I've just listened to shared practices essentially from the very beginning, and it definitely, I was planning on buying a practice eventually, but it definitely motivated me to kind of get it done sooner rather than later. So I've been listening to all, the practice underwater and everything. So I figured there's people always have something to say about stuff that you haven't seen before, that things you don't recognize that seem obvious to other people. So I'm always interested to see what other people think and what they would do if they were me.
Okay, that's awesome. All right. Well, we are going to look at this from an outsider's perspective. So stay tuned. I'm really excited to dig into the numbers, and we'll talk about it next week on Practice Underwater at our next sitting.
Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed the first part of that interview with Leah. I know I did. Alex, you have a lot of thoughts here. So the way we do these interviews, a little peek behind the curtain, is we both listen to them and break thoughts to the intro outros. And Alex, this is my first time doing one with you, sends me 4 pages single spaced of notes. That is quite the different approach from George.
You're welcome. No, I mean
I loved it.
Well, yeah, I'm glad I was able to help with that, Matt. But the thing is, with this interview, it's so interesting because one of my takeaways from it was that even if your practice selection isn't like a traditional, in air quotes, like shared practices acquisition, you can still apply a lot of the principles and adjustments that we preach on and still turn it around into a pretty decent practice. I mean, this is not your typical one that we would recommend buying by any stretch of the imagination. It was a part-time office from a guy that was 84 years old when he sold it, and it was doing $300,000 in revenue. So there's a lot there that would initially raise an eyebrow to a lot of us, but Leah was very upfront about saying, hey, I wanted to treat this as a pseudo-startup, and I want to turn things around and grow it because I see that there is some meat on the bone. And
can we get into that point for 1 second? Sorry to cut you off, but
sure.
I want to make a parallel to this being like a startup, because there is that like viewpoint out there that, shared practice coaching doesn't do startups. It's not something we have ever preached. And, George has been famously against startups for years. But our philosophy really does great with startups. It's not going to be something where we're going to help you with the floor plan or your construction, but a dental practice once running is a dental practice. And these major themes and approaches can fit anywhere.
No doubt about it. And as I'm doing a startup right now myself, I'm faced with the fact that startups are easier when you have systems. Startups are way more straightforward when you have your own systems going in. So one point that would have made Leah's approach a little bit more straightforward would be if she'd had either her own systems to plug into the practice from the get-go, or if she put a massive amount of focus in the first year or two in developing those systems. Because right now she's almost at the end of her second full year of ownership, and she's still doing a lot of things the same way that the previous owner did. And that's okay. It's just that, if you're treating something as a startup, then to me, that automatically assumes that you're going to go in eyes wide open to implement systems from the start. And as we'll learn in part 2, there's a lot of systems, low-hanging fruit that can be implemented now to take this practice to even better heights.
Well, I think she's taking it in a way that some startups do get into, in that it's extremely doctor dependent. Like it's everything based on Leah, presenting the big treatment plans, remembering things about patients, like call this person for this opening, is all her. Like it's very much like she's running the show here, and she tends to like making some excuses for older staff members and how she has to kind of like maneuver around their weaknesses to run the practice. It seems like a very exhausting way to be an owner. I know I used to fall into a lot of these patterns myself early in ownership. And I think, through listening to the podcast and, really being around George, was able to be a different way at the office. And it has created an entirely different experience for me. Is that something that you also had struggled with in the past?
Oh, yeah. I think most of us practice owners get into it with the assumption that, okay, it's all on our shoulders now because we own the practice, we write the checks, our name's on the door. Therefore, it's all our responsibility to make sure everything happens. And really, I think as you go, you realize that there's a tipping point between what you're able to do with your own 2 hands and what you can use your 2 hands to do to empower others around you. That's a realization that I think we can hear Leah making during the interview with Suzanne, because Leah is describing her team that she inherited, and she's also describing the team that she has hired. Like she's hired an assistant and she's hired a hygienist, and she speaks about those 2 team members with a whole lot more energy and vigor than she speaks about those that she inherited. And she's quick to point out, like, yeah, the people that I inherited, they're older. That doesn't necessarily mean anything in a vacuum. Like you can have staff members of any age with any ability level. But she does point out that there's sort of a disconnect between where she sees those team members being and where she wants them to be. She doesn't like working with the more seasoned assistant. She knows that there's limitations for the more seasoned front office person, but yet there's a mindset gap there where she seems unwilling to act on those things.
Yeah, it's just confusing. Like I have a client who has a staff member who is in that kind of like waiting to retire viewpoint, and that's a really tough one for me. Like I'm so like not okay with that mindset. It's a very much at effect to whatever this person chooses to do for their career when I know they're not the right fit for what I'm trying to build here. Um, but it's I really struggle with this. Please jump in here.
It takes time to develop that dispassionate muscle in leadership and ownership, because we get to where we're friends with our team members, and Leah even points out that this person that she knows has one foot out the door has also doubled as like a surrogate caregiver for her kids, picking them up from school, doing a lot of things outside the office. So they've gotten really close personally, which raises the stakes in Leah's mind another order of magnitude when talking about making a climactic career decision for this person. But at the end of the day, you're the owner. You're the owner of the business, and your first bit of loyalty is to that business. And Leah says about 5 or 6 damning things in that interview that makes you realize from the outside, like, this person needs to go. And in part 2, we get into a lot of really good detail about how to pivot away from those people and how to orient yourself towards hiring people that are going to be a better fit for the practice that she's building. But it's pretty remarkable that she's been able to grow the practice to the degree that she has while being hamstrung by the existing team members.
Yeah, I mean, we were remarking before we came on and hit record that she's definitely an SP doc. She definitely is an avid listener. She said so. You can see that in a lot of her interactions with Suzanne. But it's tough to pinpoint like one thing or a couple things she does like exceptionally well. She's just kind of like solid across the board. And I think one of the ways I feel that she's kind of missing the beat is on her vision that is not super mapped out. It's not super committed to. She kind of seems like she just has this general plan to grow the practice, but no real numbers, no milestones, no systems being put in place. Very much just kind of, moving forward. And she's had great growth, but I feel like this practice has a lot more potential than what she's doing.
No, tons of potential, even with on paper it not looking overly impressive when she bought it. But it's clear that she's been turning some of the right knobs to get it in a much more desirable place. With this practice, there's still so much meat left on the bone in terms of hygiene, because Suzanne asks a lot of great questions about what's the hygiene capacity for this office, and we learned that it's far from maxed out. Like, there's still, with the hygiene capacity that's there's still a lot of openings. There's still a lot of opportunity to maximize the one hygienist that she has along with the part-time hygienist. So, I mean, there's a few little tiny tweaks that could be made to make sure that people are spending their time more wisely at the office to fill the schedule and really get this practice up over 1 million.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think hopefully the one takeaway, if she picks just one, is to really map the vision out, because it's all kind of, she's just in the dark right now.
Right.
Without her headlights on.
Well, yeah. And she goes into the dichotomy of the two choices between being like a more full fee-for-service office, dropping Delta and becoming even less insurance dependent than she is, or growing the thing, growing hygiene, getting an associate. And to me, listening to Leah talk, it screams profitable solo, like a productive solo type office, rather than trying to, become something that she's not, because she spoke about lifestyle a lot, and she cares immensely about being able to spend time with her kids and not work too much and not work any more than the 3.5 days that she is. And she could do that obviously with having a group practice, but she doesn't seem to really relish the thought of getting a big team, having those difficult conversations. She wants to do good dentistry for a good fee and go home, which is great. And I think she needs to lean into that realization about herself.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's tough because she says it in the interview, and a lot of people I've seen this viewpoint that a bigger staff equals more headaches. Bigger office, headaches. it's not always that like correlated like that. And it's tough. It's like, is this just a type of person that wouldn't enjoy that, even if they had a mindset shift, or would that mindset shift around that make them see it differently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a chicken or egg question, and one that we contend with quite a bit. But what I do know right now with her practice being, a relatively small patient base, and not a huge amount of hygiene capacity right now. I mean, I think her big focus needs to be understanding that each patient is extremely valuable in a practice like this. When a practice where you're not seeing 40 patients a day, you're having far fewer interactions, far fewer at bats, so to speak, with diagnosis. You need to make sure that when you're treatment planning, when you're presenting, it's so critical that you treat each at bat as being very, very critical, because it is. You can't just brush it off and move on like you can in a larger office. You have to make sure that you're on all the time to maximize those chances.
Yeah, it does make everything much more important. It's a feeling I know well, and I often have that thought. The last thing I think I wanted to get into in this part of the interview was the leadership growth, that is needed here. I know that's a topic near and dear to your heart. I think it shows up everywhere through the whole first part, second part. Not willing to have conversations with staff, not willing to put in systems, like knowing what to do and not doing it. All comes back to leadership. So, what kind of things in this realm do you see?
Well, I like the fact that Leah she has a lot of self-awareness, like more than maybe we're giving her credit for here, because she does know that she needs an outsider's perspective. And she points that out very astutely, that she wanted to get an extra pair of eyes on what's going on in her practice. Step one for her is accountability, holding herself accountable. She admits to not looking at her metrics very much on Dental Intel. Like she has the software, but just doesn't use it as much as she knows she should. And then leaning into the discomfort, because right now a lot of her happiness seems to be predicated on leaving work at work and being able to go home and do as she pleases. And so my approach to working with her would be, be sure that you are doing everything you can while you're at work to build those systems so that you're not having to spend a lot of time outside of the office doing things you don't want to do. Don't run around like a chicken with your head cut off while you're at the office. Don't try to wear 10 different hats. So, delegating things, training your team, pouring into your team, understanding that an hour spent clarifying your goals and expectations with your team is going to be so beneficial for your whole team. So, because going forward, you teach them something once, chances are something's going to rub off on them. And you can, for a little bit of time investment, you can really save yourself a lot of heartache for your whole career.
That's such a good, all the things you said I loved. I think it really is a choice, right? It's not about the size of the office, about like, do I have to think about it when I'm home, or do I take it with me? It's a choice you make. It's you creating roles with your staff. It's you creating accountability. It's you delegating. Like, if you want that experience of work, you go, show up, you leave, you don't think about it. You get to create that, and that's not predicated on the size of the office. Like, I think that people should really understand that point, because it changes your whole outlook on practice ownership.
It's easy to oversimplify and say if you have a small practice, that means you love clinical challenges. And if you have a large practice, that means that you love managerial, difficult conversations type challenges. But it's hard to really delineate between the two. It's more shades of gray. Like, you're going to always have both types of challenges. It's just that you might have more of them when you have 18 staff members versus 5. And so, be comfortable wearing all those hats. Like, you're going to have to wear the hat of the entrepreneur, even if you have 5 or 6 team members. That's just the reality of it. And so, pushing yourself to become a better communicator, find better ways to say things. One conversation I had with my lead hygienist last week is, you're only going to get so good at giving anesthetic, doing scaling and route planning, like the technical part of your job. You're going to top out at some point and be as good as you're going to be. But you can always push yourself to be better about explaining things and how you're wording things and how succinctly and clearly you are when you're communicating. Like that, there's never a finish line with that. So same goes with leadership. You can think that you're the best leader in the world when you have 5 team members, but then all of a sudden you bring in 7 or 8, and then all of a sudden you have to improve, just like your team's always having to improve.
Absolutely. All right. This is a great discussion. Alex, thank you. We'll see everyone next week. We'll be back with Leah, and Alex will be here as well.
See you guys.